the insights of the Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh. The Ohr Hachaim talks about on the beginning pasuk, the first pasuk in the parsha, talks about how Hashem spoke to the Roshei Hamatos, to the heads of the tribes of the Bnei Yisrael, saying, "This is the thing that Hashem commanded." That's the first verse, and the next verse talks about vows. When a person makes a vow to Hashem, or he makes a promise to prohibit something on his soul, he shall not desecrate his word according to everything that his mouth stated, he shall do. So this is the laws of vows, and the Ohr Hachaim is going to ask some questions as to the exact wording of the pasuk, which he often does. And then what he seems to like to do, and this is what we've been getting a little flavor from the Ohr Hachaim style over the past few months that we've been learning Ohr Hachaim, is that the Ohr Hachaim likes to take some law that is mentioned in the Gemara or in the Medrash or in the Mishnah, and he says that is being hinted to in the Torah portion. So there's some idea that we know of from other sources, and although it doesn't say it clearly in the Torah, but the Ohr Hachaim somehow finds it hinted in the Torah because of certain questions and the way the verse is laid out, in the way the wording of the verse. Somehow there are certain laws, and very interesting how he does this, and he develops this. There seems to be the style, at least one of the styles of the Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh's writing. So what are the questions on the verse? So number one, he says, when God speaks to Moses, he tells Moses, tell these laws to the Jewish people. And here, what's going on? Here, it just mentions that Moses tells it to the Roshei Hamatos, to the heads of the tribes. Isn't Moses normally going to be saying his teachings to the entire Jewish people? Why does it say here the heads of the tribes? So it does stand out, this verse. And Rashi is bothered with this verse. And Rashi tells us that Hashem wanted to give honor to the Nesiim, to the heads of the tribes. So he taught them this law about vows first, and then afterwards he's going to tell the Jewish people about this law. And he says that we know that Hashem taught it to everyone also, so we shouldn't think that we shouldn't think that maybe Moshe only taught it to the heads of the tribes. So there is something called the Gezerah Shava, which is a word that it says in this verse and a word that it says in another section of laws in the Torah. And just like over there, it mentions that it was said to the entire Jewish people. Here also, we have to say that because it has the same word, it's also being told to the entire Jewish people. So Rashi is bothered with this question, that the verse sounds like it's only being told to the heads of the tribes. But Rashi says you have to say that it really was to all the Jewish people. And the only reason it says to the heads of the tribes is because Hashem wanted to give them honor. And the truth is, there are other dibros that also, the other statements in the Torah were also first mentioned to the heads of the tribes and then taught to the entire Jewish people. Now, this sounds very interesting. So, in other words, the law of Nidarim, vows, was told to everyone, just like all the other laws of the Torah. But here in the laws of vows, the Torah writes that Moshe told it to the leaders of the tribes, and we understand that he told it to the entire Jewish people afterwards. What about all the other laws of the Torah? So Rashi says the other laws of the Torah were the same thing. Hashem told it, or Moshe told it to the leaders of the tribes first. So why does it only say it here that it's to the leaders of the tribes? That's a question. And the answer Rashi gives is that it teaches us something unique about a leader with regard to vows, that there's some special law about a leader, and that an expert has the ability to annul a vow. If you don't have an expert, you need 3 lay people to annul a vow. And that's why it mentions it here with regard to the heads of the tribes, because it's hinting to this law that when the Torah says that Moshe spoke these words to the heads of the tribes, it's hinting to us that there is some uniqueness with regard to someone who's an expert, like the heads of the tribes, when it comes to vows, annulling vows. But really, the entire Torah was really first said to the heads of the tribes, and then it was recited, then it was told and taught to the rest of the Jewish people. Now, the Ohr Hachaim is going to mention a lot of these ideas. What I just mentioned to you was Rashi. The Ohr Hachaim is going to mention a lot of these ideas, but in his own order, in his own style, in his own way. He's going to bring out a very interesting point. So the first thing he says is, why is this verse unique, where it talks about Moses telling the heads of the tribes about this law of vows? Why is this verse spelling that out while the other verses in the Torah, the other laws of the Torah, don't spell that out? So he brings down that there's a Medrash, Sifri, where it says that when it came to the trumpets, so it talks about the trumpets in an earlier parsha in Bamidbar, where it mentions, I believe in Bahaloischa, I believe it's Bahaloischa, it's where it mentions about the trumpets that they had to make in order to gather the Jewish people. And when it talks about those trumpets, so it mentions first about gathering the people, and only afterwards does it mention the leaders of the tribes, gathering the leaders of the tribes. So the surprising thing is that it mentions the Jewish people before the leaders of the tribes. So therefore, the Medrash says, you know why here it mentions the leaders of the tribes? Because it was sort of balancing it out. Before it mentioned with the trumpets, first it mentions the people, and then it mentions the leaders of the tribe. So here it mentions the leader of the tribes first, so to speak, in order to balance it out or give them honor, because there it was almost like a little dishonor for them. So that was, this is in Parshas Bahaloischa. Let me see at the beginning over here. Asay lecha shtei chatzotzros kesef. Make for yourself. This was, yeah. Make for yourself 2 trumpets, 2 silver trumpets, banged out, hammered work, and it's to mikra ha'eda, to summon the community, and to masa samachnos, to get people to start traveling. And there it says, if you blow in them, then everyone will assemble. And if you blow with one of them, then the leaders of the tribes. So it first mentioned the whole congregation, And then it mentions the leaders of the tribes. So if you blow with two, then it's they all have to gather, kol ha'eda. And then it says if you blow with one, it mentions about the Nesiim. And that is a sign, blowing with one trumpet, that it would be only the Nesiim, which is a sign that they should gather and assemble before you. So there, in Parshas Ba'aloischa, it mentions the people first before the leaders. So here, it sort of gives them honor and fixes up, rectifies what the fact that it put the other people first. Here it puts the leaders first. So that's one explanation that the Medrash says. But then, in another place, it explains like Rashi said, and that is that it's giving us this important law that a Yachid Mumcha, an expert, is allowed to annul the vows. A person who's an expert, he doesn't need to have a panel of three people. Even one alone can annul a vow himself. But the Ohr Hachaim says, but that sounds like a drush. That's a little, that's expounding. It's not so clear in the Torah. So the Ohr Hachaim is looking for maybe a more direct shot, a direct insight rather than a hint. And that's like, in other words, does the Torah really talk about the Yachid Mumcha, the individual annulling a vow? No, that's a beautiful insight that Rashi even mentions, but it's definitely not like so clearly in the Torah. It's a very nice hint that that Moshe told the laws of vows to the leaders of the tribes. So the Torah tells us that to teach us a little hint that, who can annul a vow? It doesn't talk about annulling vows. It talks about making vows. But it gives us a little hint, who can annul a vow? A leader of a tribe, someone who's an expert. That's what it's hinting to. So that's a nice hint, but the Ohr Hachaim wants to know if maybe there might be something more obvious and connected to the simpler meaning to the verse. And then he says there's another problem here in the verse. Again, this is the style of the Ohr Hachaim, to dig into the details of the verse and see and show that there seems to be something that's being hinted to, because otherwise, why is it being worded this way? And I must tell you, this is a little strange, the verse, because the verse says, Vayadaber Moshe el Roshei Hamatos Livnei Yisrael. Moshe spoke to the leaders of the tribes, to the Bnei Yisrael, saying, this is the thing that Hashem commanded. Now, did he say it to the leaders of the tribes or to the Bnei Yisrael? So the way all the commentaries are learning, it said it to the leaders of the tribes. So where do the words Livnei Yisrael fit in? It says Livnei Yisrael. He said it to Moses, told these laws of vows to the leaders of the tribes, and then it adds these two words, Livnei Yisrael. Did he tell it to the leaders of the tribes that they should repeat it to the Bnei Yisrael? Did he say it to the leaders of the tribes and to the Bnei Yisrael? Like, are they the leaders of the tribes of the Bnei Yisrael? So Livnei Yisrael could mean to the Bnei Yisrael or of the Bnei Yisrael. So you could translate it in many different ways, but maybe it doesn't even need to have that lamed. And this is what the Ohr Hachaim says. Let it just say Roshei Hamatos Bnei Yisrael or Roshei Matos Bnei Yisrael. Let it leave out the hey and the lamed. And it could just say Moses told these laws to the leaders of the tribes of the Jewish people. So in other words, you don't need that lamed or the hey there. It could say Vayidaber Moshe el Roshei Matos Bnei Yisrael, the heads of leaders of the Bnei Yisrael. Or it should just say the leaders, the heads of the tribes of the heads of the tribes of the Bnei Yisrael. So it could leave out. There's extra letters there in the Hebrew. So why does it say them? So he says that maybe you want to say that he said these laws to the Roshei Amatos and to the Bnei Yisrael, and it should have a vav there, but sometimes the verse leaves out a vav, so that's not surprising. So it's like it said two things. Moshe said this to the Roshei Hamatos and to the Bnei Yisrael. So he said it to both of them. He first said it to the Roshei Hamatos, and he also said it to the Bnei Yisrael. Now that sounds like a nice insight, but there's a problem. The problem with learning that way is that we just learned Rashi. And what did Rashi tell us? That who says that this teaching, this laws of vows, was told to the Jewish people? Maybe it was only told to the Roshei Hamatos. Rashi says that. How could Rashi even think that if the meaning of the verse is that he told it to the Roshei Hamatos and to the Bnei Yisrael? Then where would Rashi, which Rashi is quoting Sifri, where would the Sifri get this question from? Maybe he didn't even tell it to them, or the Gemara. It's actually it's a Gemara, I should say. It's a Gemara in a Durham. But so why would they even ask such a question? And then what's the answer that they give? They give an answer that it's a Gzeira Shava. That how do we know that the Bnei Yisrael were told these laws? Only because this was a teaching that we expounded upon in order to come to the conclusion that it was taught to the Bnei Yisrael. It means that the verse doesn't say that it was taught to the Bnei Yisrael. There's some way of expounding called the Gzeira Shava that it says a word here, a word there. That's how we know it went to the Bnei Yisrael. So obviously the simple meaning is not that Moshe told this law to the Roshei Hamatos and to the Bnei Yisrael. So we've just proven wrong that you can't learn that it's Bil of Bnei Yisrael, that Hashem had Moshe teach these laws to the leaders and to the Bnei Yisrael. That can't be the meaning here, because if that's so, then the Gemara would not be bringing Gzeira Shava. And the Ohr Hachaim says, and don't think of Gzeira Shava as some simple thing. This is a Al Tehi Gzeira Shava Kala Be'inecha. There is a Gemara that uses that term. The Gzeira Shava is not a small little lesson, some type of asmachta or something, some type of a hint, or this is the real deal. So he says if there's a Gzeira Shava, then it's obviously not clear in the pasuk. But then he says there's also other problems with the verse. What are the other problems? Well, if you read the verse again, Moshe told the Roshei Hamatos, Livnei Yisrael, which we don't know what that means. He told the Roshei Hamatos, the leaders of the tribes, Lamar saying. Now, what is the Lamar? So the Lamar who are they supposed to tell this to? In other words, now, if the Roshei Hamatos are supposed to say it to the Bnei Yisrael, so it should say, Lamar Livnei Yisrael, it should switch it around. Like, in other words, the previous words are Livnei Yisrael, and afterwards it says Lamar. Now, wouldn't it make more sense to say Lamar Livnei Yisrael? Now, do you want to answer the previous question, that the Roshei Hamatos are supposed to tell this to the Bnei Yisrael, then you should fit the word Lamar in between. And it should say, Moshe said to the Roshei Hamatos, Lamar Livnei Yisrael, that they should tell it to the Bnei Yisrael. So that would be a way to explain it, but the pasuk doesn't say it that way. Now,
the grammar is wrong. The Livnei Yisrael is
the order of the words. Livnei Yisrael is a big problem. And then what is the Lamar? Who is the Lamar to say it to? Now, then he says another question is, what does it mean when it says Zehadav? This is the thing, and not what? This and not something else. This is the thing that Hashem commanded. So, as I mentioned earlier, what the Ohr Hachaim likes to do is find some other idea that the Torah, Gemara, the Medrash, that it mentions, and show how it's really hinted to in the pasuk. And based on the different wording, the unusual text that the pasuk says, it sometimes hints to these, it alludes to certain laws that we think are only in the Gemara and the Medrash, but they're actually pretty clearly hinted to in the Torah. So what is that? So he says there's a statement in the Gemara Chagiga. What does it say over there? That Heter Nedarim is pireach ba'avir. The annulment of vows is flying in the sky, in the air. It hovers in the air. What does that mean that it hovers in the air? So the common understanding is that how do you know you're allowed to annul a vow? Rabbis can, before Rosh Hashanah, we annul our vows. And if a person makes a vow, they can annul it. How do you know you can do that? Where does it say in the Torah that a rabbi, if they have three people to get together, they can annul a vow, or an expert can annul a vow with one person? Where do you get such a law? Where does it say this law? It's not in any parsha in the Torah. So where does it come from, the annulment of vows? So the Gemara says that it's hireach ba'avir. It's like it's floating in midair. It's not really well sourced in writing, but it is well sourced in the tradition. Meaning we have a tradition that it's acceptable. Hashem told Moshe at Sinai, halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai, that a vow could be annulled. Now, you don't see that in the Torah. You do see in the Torah that a wife makes a vow, or a daughter makes a vow, that the father or the husband can annul a wife's vow. But that really is falls into a more logical, there's more logic to that, at least for a husband to a wife, because the wife doesn't have the right to, it wouldn't be appropriate for her to do things that could mess up her marriage. So therefore, so she could make a vow on things that really are not under her jurisdiction to be able to do. She doesn't have the right to really make those type of things. So therefore, the husband has the ability to annul such a vow. So there is a concept of a husband. It's the term annul is not exactly correct. It's really the husband stops the vow. But the annulment of a vow from a rabbi or a three individuals or a expert rabbi, that concept of annulment of vows is not in the Torah. That's called pereach va'avir. So he says, why did Hashem make this special law that you can annul vows, but he doesn't want to tell anyone about it? It's nowhere there. There's a special law, but it's not, it's like a secret. This is a secret law. Why did Hashem do that? He didn't do that for any of the other mitzvahs. Everything is written clear in the Torah. You have it. Of course, there's a lot of details to every law, and there's other things that the Gemara expounds upon. But this is a very surprising thing. Here, all of a sudden, it's pereach ba'avir. The Gemara uses the special term that this is something that's like floating in air, midair. And why did Hashem do that? He says the reason is because Hashem does not want people to treat vows lightly. And therefore, Hashem, in his wisdom, he concealed this and he transmitted it to the great scholars that they should know when to the different laws, the various rules. But for the masses, the door should be closed, and meaning there's just a term used, ne'ule delis. It's a term used that the door should be closed from them in order that they fulfill the vow. It should be closed for them to consider not fulfilling the vow, and they should be forced to fulfill the vow, as it says, lo yachel dvare. They should not desecrate their word. So the question that the Ohr Hachaim just answered is a very interesting idea, that we have a law where the Torah doesn't tell us about this law, but it's a tradition given to Moses, and the Gemara tells us about it. And the Gemara tells us that this law is called floating in midair because it's not written clearly in the Torah. Now, Chaim says, and the reason why it's not written clearly in the Torah is because if it was written clearly in the Torah, people would be mezalzel. They will treat vows lightly, and they will disregard them. They won't consider it important. And therefore, Hashem only told hold this law, had it transmitted to the great people or the scholarly people, and otherwise it would have been vows would not be, we wouldn't realize the importance of vows. Now, once we know that the laws of annulment of vows are meant to be done, it's not meant for everyone to know about, now we can divide up the pasuk into two parts and say that one part of the verse is meant for some people, and another part of the verse is meant for other people. So now the Ohr Hachaim says, now let's look at the verse. Moses spoke to the leaders of the tribes, which basically means these are the great people of Klal Yisrael, the scholars, the leaders. And what did he tell them? He told them everything about vows. And then the verse says, Livnei Yisrael Lamar, but to the Bnei Yisrael, Lamar, you should say, meaning Moses was told, or Moses told the Rashi Amatos everything. In Livnei Yisrael Lamar Zehadavar. But to the Bnei Yisrael, he was told to say that only this thing about the laws of the vows, not about the annulment of vows. The annulment of vows, that's for the Rashi Amatos. And with this, he says, we've answered our, resolved our questions, because the main question had to do with the words Bnei Yisrael. Is he telling the Rashi Amatis, or is telling this to the laws to the Bnei Yisrael? And the answer is that he's telling this to the Rashi Hamatis about the annulment of vows and all the laws he's telling to the Rashi Hamatis. And then it's the Bnei Yisrael Lamar Zehadavar. The Bnei Yisrael is saying this is the thing, meaning the laws of the vows that I'm telling you, but I'm not telling you the laws of annulment of vows. Now he is gonna get, the Ohr Hachaim did not answer everything, so he's gonna like touch upon the Gzeira Shava soon. But
when you say the laws of the vows, are you talking about the importance of a vow? Or he's telling you about all the halachos, about how important it is? You shouldn't say it because if you do it, you can't do this. You can't. A lot of halachos,
right,
and you're leaving out the hafrashas nedarim.
leading out. What did you just say?
He's leaving out the
leaving out hatoras nedar. Right.
hataras nedarim. I'm sorry.
Leaving out hatoras nedar, meaning it's two separate rules. There's the laws of vows and the laws of annulment of vows. It's the worlds apart. You know? Right. So right. So he's teaching them, the Bnei Yisrael, he's only teaching them the laws of the vows, not the laws of the annulment of vows. And as you're explaining it, Isaac, that it means the severity of vows, the importance of, how important it is to keep the vow, the punishment for the vows, if a person doesn't keep the vow, what is considered a vow, what are the wording of a vow, things like that. Those are the laws of the vows that we learn from the parsha.
It doesn't sound too straight. It doesn't sound like, God talking to Moses, tell the Jews this. That's all.
Well, that's the story. You can't tell, we'd like to tell everyone everything, but not always are people capable of handling too much knowledge. And this is one case. You don't want to tell everyone. It's dangerous. Too much knowledge is dangerous, and that's why you can't tell people the laws of annulment of vows. Imagine if you make an announcement before they make a appeal in shul. By the way, everyone should know that you can annul vows later on. You can come to me later and annul vows. Everyone's going to buy mafta yoina. They'll pay who knows what.
That's one way to look at it. But how about the person who had made a vow and now it's eating away at him because he knows he needs to break it. He needs to break whatever it is, and it's just inside him.
Oh,
And
this
he
is
breaks it finally, and then whatever he goes through, guilt, whatever it is, the damage it does, and he could have annulled it,
right.
but he didn't
So,
do that.
so that's a good question. So, in other words, what you're asking is, so if no one knows about the laws of annulment of vows, they're not going to be so practically done. In other words, why did Hashem teach the laws if they're never going to be used? And what about the person who needs it? So the understanding in this, according to this interpretation, the Ohr Hachaim is going to come with a new interpretation, not totally new, but he'll touch upon what you're saying right in the next paragraph. But the understanding up till now is that when you do have that problem, you'll go to the Rav and he'll come up with this something that you never heard of called annulment of vows, and he'll say, "Oh, by the way, your vow is not a vow, and you're exempt, you're fine." And he's going to basically annul it and permit it.
So
In other
when
words,
you need it, you have it, but you shouldn't really
right,
know about it.
you should really know about how it works. It's almost like some rabbanim; they don't like to tell you the reason why this is allowed. They just tell you it's okay, you can do it, and they don't want to tell you a reason. It's almost like this idea, because sometimes they're nervous to tell too much. You used to find that with certain rabbanim. Other rabbanim, like they'll talk to you for an hour, but there are some rabbanim they're very nervous to share with you too much information. It seems like it's
You also
similar to
don't
this.
want to be quoted because no, Emes, that's the
Right,
problem. You're
right,
going to go and say, look, Rabbi, Dad just told me that I can, yeah,
right. That's true. That's true. That's
telephone.
true. And it's not just quoted, they'll make comparisons. People will start making comparisons in laws. So because of that, there's reason to keep things quiet. So that's why Hashem didn't write about annulment of vows in the Torah. But it is a law, and it's something that person will come to their Rav when they have a problem of a vow, and he'll annul it for them, and it'll work. It'll apply the laws of annulment of vows will apply. But to translate the verse, he's translating the verse that Moshe told Rashi Amatis everything, but Levnei Yisrael he told Zeh. He told this thing, only the laws of vows, but not this. Whenever it says Zeh, it's like I told you this, but I didn't tell you that. It's like saying specifically this and excluding something. I'm not telling you anything about annulment of vows. I told them the laws of the vows, but not the annulment. Now, the Ohr Hachaim says you could say a little slightly differently. And he says that Moshe told the leaders of the tribes that the entire mitzvah, the Livnei Yisrael Lamar, and then it says Livnei Yisrael that they should. Moshe told the Bnei Yisrael that let me just read this one more second. He said to the Bnei Yisrael Lamar, the way the Ohr Hachaim is translating this is that the Bnei Yisrael, and he told the Bnei Yisrael also, Lamar, that they should say if they have a problem with the vow, and this is what I was mentioning earlier, that Nispshat, he's actually telling them about there is a concept of annulment, that he said if you have a problem with the vow, you should come. Livnei Yisrael Lamar, that if you he told the Bnei Yisrael, say, voice your problem. You should come and say to the leaders of the tribes, the Livnei Yisrael Lamar, that they should tell to the leaders of the tribes if they made a vow and they have a problem with it, and the leaders of the tribes will tell them what they can annul and what they can't annul according to the halachos. So what this means is the people are told the concept of annulment, but they are not told any of the specifics, and therefore it's zehadavar. This is the thing that Hashem commanded, means that I'm teaching you the laws of the vows, but I'm not filling you in on the details of the annulment of the vows. And if they want to have it annulled, they should approach the leaders. So Moshe tells the Roshei Hamatos in the Bnei Yisrael, Lamar, and to the Bnei Yisrael, they should tell it to the leaders. And if they have a problem with their vow. So in other words, it's part of the meaning of the verse. Again, the previous, a little confusing here, but the previous way of learning it, the Ohr Hachaim gave two interpretations. The previous way of learning it is Moshe told the Rosh Hashanah, is the leaders of the tribes, everything. He told Bnei Yisrael, he said, you should say only the laws of vows. That's one way of learning. Now comes another way. Moshe told the Rosh Hashanah is everything. The Bnei Yisrael Lamar, that he told the Bnei Yisrael that, by the way, if you have a problem with vows, you should tell it to the leaders and see what they can annul. We're not telling you what you can annul, what you can't. Just telling you if you have a problem, go to your local rabbi. Anna, yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there are always rules and exceptions from the rule. That's why exactly, it doesn't mean that you don't follow the rule, because it sometimes has exceptions. And that's what I think is a good explanation to this part of, of giving a vow and try. And if you have to, absolutely have to, you could really cancel it, or you could kind of know how to do it. As a matter of fact, the same situation happened when people hire a lawyer, an attorney. You see, you know that by the rule, it was not done correctly. But you hire a specialist who could probably explain to you or find a way where your step out of the law, if it is possible, could be explained or could be canceled.
Right.
I think this is a very common practice in our society.
Right. So, but I guess what you're emphasizing is the fact that because there's laws and exceptions to the laws, you need to go to someone who's an expert or who knows the laws in order to figure it out. But and we're not telling you all the details. That's leave it up to them. They will decide. They will tell you what it's not meant for you, because if you knew all of these things, you might take it in the wrong way and use it in a way that it's not meant to be used.
Again, it makes very, very, very good sense for a rabbi to figure out if it is the promise that you could cancel or it is not possible. That's why I see it as a very common sense rule. There are laws, there are rules, and there are exceptions. And that's, in everything that we do.
Right.
Okay. I thought that it kind of will make it a little bit more clear. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, so the Ohr Hachaim now comes to his the problem that he had mentioned earlier, is if this is really mentioned to the entire Bnei Yisrael, so what do we have this Gzeira Shava for if the Jews are being told this law? What is the Gzeira Shava really teaching? So the Ohr Hachaim says that the Gzeira Shava, this method of interpreting that the law of vows was also told to the Jewish people, even though the verse, according to the way the Ohr Hachaim is translating it, verse sort of says that. So it rather the meaning is it's not a question of if the Jewish people were told this law. The question is, did Moshe Rabbeinu teach this law to them? That's what the question. That's what the Gzeira Shava is teaching us. So you might have thought that Moshe didn't teach this law to the Jewish people, and Moses himself personally taught the law to the leaders of the tribes, but maybe he personally didn't teach this law to the entire Jewish people, and maybe it was taught to them through other means, maybe the Roshei Amatos, maybe maybe they learned the law. Hashem somehow got it conveyed to them, but who says Moshe taught it to them? And therefore, because the verse only says that Moshe taught it to the Roshei Amatos, and therefore the Gzeira Shava teaches that Moshe also said it to the Bnei Yisrael. Now, I'm just skipping 2 paragraphs here because I don't know if it's important to go through them. We're a little limited with time. So he says that B'derech remez, in a way of hinting, you could say that the pasuk that it says L'bnei Yisrael is as follows. Another way of interpreting this is follows: that a person is supposed to be very careful regarding vows. Where do we know that from? We know that from Yanai. King Yanai had 1,000 cities, and they were all destroyed because of truthful vows. Now, does that sound strange? They were destroyed because of truthful vows. I would think it would say because of untruthful vows, but it doesn't. It says because of truthful vows. That's why his 1,000 cities were destroyed. And the meaning behind this is because people were making vows for trivial matters. You ever hear people say, I promise all the time? They always love to say, I promise, I promise. It's a very big mistake for people to always, make promises. And because a vow is a very serious and severe matter in Jewish law, at least. And therefore, a person is not supposed to just run around and making vows that aren't 100% necessary. In fact, I believe that's why they have a special verbiage on contracts and on government papers that I vow or I affirm. They give you like an option or affirm. Why do they write that or affirm? I believe. What's the reason, Isaac? Why do they sometimes write or affirm?
It's really pretty much the same thing because people come in and they.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you. I don't know why.
Just
a little clearer.
Better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay. People come in, I'm not allowed to swear. So for you to affirm, yes, I'll affirm. It's the same exact thing.
Right. But there's a concept. Where did they get this thing in the government to write affirm?
That I can't tell you. I don't know.
Who started it?
I thought it was from Orthodox Jews.
Yeah, you don't even need that because nowadays, under this new statute they put in, they can say, I hereby state under penalty of perjury.
Uh-huh.
Those are the magic words.
Uh-huh. Okay. So I believe that the affirming, the reason why a lot of Jewish people don't like to write that I don't think the word was vow. There was another, I swear. Right. Normally it says I swear or affirm. And so Jewish people don't like to write I swear. We don't like to say that. We don't like to sign because we're not supposed to make vows regarding trivial matters. And how much is a trivial matter? $100, $1,000? Everything could be considered trivial. And therefore, we try never to vow. That's the real, that's the, a real smart way to live your life is don't make vows. You try to I'll try to pick you up. I'll try to, I'm not promising to get you by 2 o'clock, but I'll try. We don't make vows. We don't promise. Never promise. And
they say, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Well, I don't want to swear, but I'll be there. I'll try my best. I affirm.
Right. So affirm is so it's a Jewish way of not making a vow. Now, we still don't lie, but it's not a vow. Now, why is that so important? You see this story here. Yanai, King Yanai, this is a story from Bamidbar Rabbah. It's from the Medrash in Bamidbar, where Yanai had 1,000 cities, and because they were all destroyed, because the people in his under his subjects would all make vows. It was like the common way to talk. This way, they would make vows. It's not that they transgress them, but it's just not. It's a very it's not something that you should take lightly. A vow is not something we take lightly, and therefore you're not supposed to go around making vows. Now, however, there are times when it is good. So the Ohr Hachaim says, although they would fulfill it, they were punished. And the pasuk says there are vows that Hashem commanded us to take. And that's what it says to the children of Israel. It says to the children of Israel, saying, and the Gemara says that the word lamar means immorality. And what does that mean? That when there's a concern of immorality, then it's important to make a vow. And what's the example? So the Ohr Hachaim brings a case of the story of Boaz, where Boaz was willing to marry Ruth, but he said that, I first have to find out if the relative of yours is willing to marry you. He comes first. And if he doesn't want to marry you, then I'll marry. So it sounded like a vow that he was making, that he's going to marry her, and, she shouldn't be concerned. She should be relaxed, because either the other person will marry you or I'll marry. But the Gemara learns that the Medrash explains that what Boaz really did was he made a vow that he's not going to touch her. Why did he make a vow that he's not going to touch her? Because this was in the middle of the night. She came crawling into his bed, where he's sleeping, and he's right next to her. No one's around, and he needed an extra level of inspiration and an extra level of being forced, that in order not to fall into sin. And so what did he do? He made a vow. I am not going to dare touch you. And in other words, the verse just says he swore. The verse Chai Hashem, that he swore by the life of Hashem. But the Medrash explains that what it means really is that he, in order not to fall into sin, he made an extra vow, which would force him to feel obligated to keep his vow, because a vow is so powerful that it could control. It would control you against your Yetzer Hara, against your evil inclination. And so sometimes a vow is very valuable. For example, a person wants to make a diet, go on a diet. So you have making a diet from cheesecake. Now the problem is Shavuos time, and you have 10 cheesecakes in your freezer because you're going to be serving it for Shavuos.
Looks like everybody froze. Everyone froze.
Froze?
Everyone froze.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. How long was I frozen for? 10 seconds?
Yeah.
Okay. So all I said was that a vow is a very powerful method of controlling oneself. For example, if a person wants to go on a diet from cheesecake and it's Shavuos time. So what do? You say, okay, that's it. I'm going on a diet. I'm not going to have cheesecake. No cheesecake. But you have 10 cheesecakes in your freezer. And then that night, everyone goes to sleep and you're up and you can't sleep and you're thinking about cheesecake and and you're in the kitchen and you're okay. I just need a drink, but the cheesecake is right there and you can't control yourself. But if you made a vow, that would be a means to force yourself into not falling into your habit of just noshing away on cheesecake. And so a vow is a very powerful method when you need that extra power to force yourself to do something. So here, the Ohr Hachaim says that when it comes to Giloy Arayos, when it comes to a sin of immorality, there's room to make. Sometimes a person has to make a vow in order not to succumb to the risk of to succumb to temptation and fall into sin. So that's what it means, and that's why it uses the word ish tiyidor neder when a person makes a neder. And the word ish is often used the concept of a person overpowering himself from his Yetzer Hara. So that's the meaning of Livnei Yisrael, that that Livnei Yisrael Lamar, that the Jewish people should be told that there are times when it is Livnei Yisrael Lamar Zehadavar, that to Bnei Yisrael you should tell them this is the matter, meaning sometimes this is appropriate, that it's not always appropriate to make a vow, but Zehadavar, in fact, there are times when it's a terrible sin. It's a sin, even if you're going to keep the vow. But Zehadavar, this is the matter, that meaning that only in this case is where you should Lamar Zehadavar. When it's a matter of Lamar, which is Lamar is referring to Giloy Arayos, when it comes to a matter of immorality, that's when Zehadavar Shetziv Hashem. This is the thing that Hashem commanded. So what it comes out is that Moshe told all the laws to the Rashi Amatis. To the Bnei Yisrael, he told about, by the way, keep in mind that by the way, Lamar, when it comes to immorality, this is the matter that Hashem commanded. Again, he's building on different statements from the Gemara and from that Lamar could mean immorality, and the Zehadavar he's saying is excluding something, that in other words, only in this matter you should make a vow, but you should be careful not to make a vow in other matters. And that's the reason why it says ishti yidor neder, when a person makes a vow, that's when you should really make a vow, and it's a mitzvah to make a vow to go against your Yetzer Hara and protect yourself. And that is the first Ohr Hachaim, pretty much in its entirety, of this on this parsha. Okay, any thoughts on that?
Rabbi, you said something before about vow connected to people dying or something.
Well, we said that the cities were destroyed. King Yanai had 1,000 cities, and they were all destroyed because of truthful vows.
So, okay, so I have a balatorium here. Can I say it over?
Yeah.
It says, the gematria of the word Nedarim vows is 304, which is equal to that of Rotseach, murderer. This intimates that a person who makes vows and does not fulfill them is considered as a murderer. For the Gemara says, children die as a consequence of their parents' sin of failure to carry out their vows.
Huh.
And it says Shabbos 32b.
Uh-huh. Okay. Anyway, what I wanted to end off with was that in Hasidic writings, a vow is actually not a good thing, even if you're going to fulfill it, because we're supposed to elevate everything. And a vow generally means you're separating yourself from something. I mean, either from food, from traveling somewhere, from doing something, from, going to your friend, to, and in truth, we're supposed to be elevating everything that we come in contact with. So a vow in general is not a good thing, not only because it's such a severe matter, but because life in the whole world is meant for us to elevate things. And the concept of a vow, it really fits in as the way Hasidic writing writes. It's very similar along the lines of what the Ohr Hachaim is writing here, that the purpose of a vow is when you're not going to be able to elevate those things, when you're going to fall into sin because of it. That's when you need to make the vow to protect yourself. You have no choice. You need to protect yourself from it, because you're not going to be able to elevate it. You're going to end up indulging in getting sick from whatever you can't control yourself from, or you're going to end up sinning. So in that case, you can't elevate it. You want to inspire people to serve Hashem. So you hang out with people that are not dressed properly, and it's going to create a problem. So therefore, you're going to have to make a vow, so to speak, and separate yourself. That's not an area where you can elevate. Some people maybe could, maybe a person who's in a different scenario. But a person has to know where they're able to elevate and where they need to make a vow from. And that's the idea that a vow is zehadavar lemar zehadavar shetziv Hashem. On certain matters, you have to make a vow, and that's important to control your Yetzer Hara.